I recently got my first speeding ticket in Karma, our 2024 Tesla Model Y. And here's the crazy part. The technology in my Tesla probably could have prevented the entire thing if I had actually been using it at the time. The circumstances surrounding this ticket were so unusual that for the first time in my life, I decided to hire a law firm to fight it. So did they actually get me out of the ticket? And how much did the whole thing ultimately cost me? In this TesLUCKY video, I'm going to tell you the whole story. Welcome back to TesLUCKY, the YouTube channel where you can follow the adventures of Lucky, the 2016 Tesla Model X, and Karma, the 2024 Tesla Model Y. I'm actually filming this TesLUCKY video at the Tesla Superchargers at the Fountains Shopping Plaza in Plantation, Florida. You are not going to believe what happened to me the last time I tried to get here. I've been driving Teslas now for about 7.5 years, and in that time I have gotten exactly 2 tickets. One in Lucky back on November 17th of 2023, and now one in Karma on April 23 of 2026. Lucky's ticket wasn't actually for speeding. I mean, I may have been going over the speed limit, but the officer wrote the ticket for distracted driving. I was not in autopilot at the time, and I do believe that had I been using autopilot, I probably could have prevented that ticket. We made an entire video telling that story, so I'll put a link in the description to that video. And in that video, my daughter Carly shares her perspectives watching her mom get pulled over by the popo. But first, let me acknowledge the obvious. The number one way to prevent a speeding ticket in your Tesla is to drive the speed limit. There, that's my public service announcement for this video. That first ticket in Lucky, combined with the cost of driving school, ultimately cost me $360.33. Or in TesLUCKY financial terminology, that's the equivalent of about 50 skinny vanilla lattes at Starbucks. So keep that number, $360.33 in mind. Because this time I hired a law firm to fight Karma's ticket, and we're going to find out whether the decision ultimately cost me more or less than that 2023 ticket that I got in Lucky. So let's get to the story about Karma's first ticket. I even went back to the scene of the crime to recreate the route for this video, and Karma has graciously agreed to reprise her role. Now, unfortunately, the police officer and the wandering lady that I will tell you about in this story were both unavailable for the reenactment, so you're going to just have to use your imagination for those parts. It was April 23, 2026. Storm and I were in South Florida to go see Bruce Springsteen in concert at the Amarant Bank Arena in Sunrise, Florida, which is just a little bit west of Fort Lauderdale. And by the way, that was a different Bruce Springsteen concert than the one featured in Storm's first Tesla road trip video. We actually saw Bruce Springsteen twice on this tour, just 10 days apart. Anyway, before the concert, we were driving to the Tesla Superchargers at the Fountains Shopping Plaza in Plantation. I was using full self-driving, and Karma was navigating us to these Superchargers, these ones. Everything was completely normal until it wasn't. We were driving west on Broward Boulevard and had to stop at a red light at University Drive where we would need to take a left turn. So we were stopped at the red light, and there was this woman wandering around in the streets who appeared to be either drunk or high or maybe both in the middle of the afternoon. She was walking very close to moving traffic and nearly got hit by passing cars more than once. She came fairly close to Karma. Now, I know full self-driving detects pedestrians, and I know the car was probably perfectly capable of handling the situation. But watching what was happening made both of us uncomfortable, and my instinct was simply to take over. So I disengaged full self-driving and started driving Karma manually because I wanted to get away from the situation as quickly and safely as possible. And that one little decision started a chain reaction. Storm and I continued talking about what we had just witnessed. And even though I have driven to these exact same superchargers countless times, I completely missed the turn. I was supposed to turn right on Southwest 10th Street, and I just drove right past it. Now, human beings miss turns and exits all the time. Full self-driving occasionally does get something wrong too. It is certainly not perfect. But in my personal experience, full self-driving misses a lot less turns than I frequently do. And I'm sure Carly would attest to this. So now I have driven past my turn. No big deal, right? I figured I would just make the next right and then circle back around. So I turned right onto Peters Road, expecting to find another street that would allow me to turn right and keep going back to the Superchargers. Except there wasn't one. As you can see from this map, there really wasn't a convenient through street connecting Peters Road back to Southwest 10th Street, where I should have turned in the first place. And remember, I'm still driving manually. What I wish I had done at some point was incredibly simple. I could have just tapped on the navigation button on Karma's screen and let full self-driving figure out the fastest way to get back to the Superchargers. But I didn't do that. Instead, I kept trying to solve the problem myself. Be honest, have you ever done this? You're somewhere unfamiliar, you miss a turn, and instead of just letting the navigation reroute you, you start trying to fix the problem and fix the mistake yourself. Well, that's exactly what I did. I continued down Peters Road until I reached another traffic light. There weren't any logical right turns ahead, so I decided the easiest solution was to make a U-turn and head back to University Drive. There was just one problem. I was still in the right lane because I was hoping to make a right turn. And there was another vehicle beside me in the left lane, so I needed to get into that lane to make my U-turn. So when the light changed, I accelerated quickly to get ahead of the car in the left lane so that I could make my U-turn. And that turned out to be a very expensive decision because almost immediately I saw a police officer standing in the street, frantically waving his arms at me to pull over. I pulled over, and then I watched him dart across the street and pull over another car traveling in the opposite direction. And that's when I started to figure out what was going on. Somehow I had missed the signage indicating that I had entered a school zone. There were actually 2 schools on the south side of Peters Road. But from where I was driving, the schools themselves were not obvious to me. And you don't have to take my word for it. This is what that stretch of Peters Road actually looks like from the driver's seat. The schools are kind of set back from the road behind trees and landscaping and some other buildings that don't look like schools. I hadn't noticed any children crossing the street. There weren't any children walking on the side of the road. There weren't any school pickup lines. And I had never driven down this particular stretch of Peters Road before. And then things got even stranger. At one point, this officer had approximately 5 vehicles pulled over at the same time. He was literally running back and forth across the street, communicating with all the different drivers. I'm not going to speculate about his motivation. I can only tell you what Storm and I witnessed. And we have never seen a traffic stop quite like this before. At one point, the officer showed me a number on his radar gun, but with several vehicles stopped at the same time, I honestly had no way of knowing whether the number he showed me on that radar gun represented Karma's speed or the speed of one of the other vehicles that had been stopped. And the officer wasn't interested in having much of a conversation with me. He wrote me the ticket, handed it to me, and then moved on to the other vehicles. And just like that, Karma had her first speeding ticket. If you are enjoying my misfortune so far, could you please at least give this video a like? I think I've earned that much. It won't help pay for the ticket, but it will make me feel a little better. So what did I do next? I tapped on that full self-driving button and I let Karma navigate herself directly to these Tesla Superchargers. At this point in my Tesla driving career, I'm 2 for 2. I have received 2 tickets in 7.5 years of driving Teslas, and I believe that both of them could have been prevented by using the technology available in the cars. That would be autopilot in Lucky and full self-driving here in Karma. Lessons learned. But now I had another decision to make. What was I going to do about the ticket? Storm and I watch a lot of Florida Panthers hockey games on TV. And if you watch Florida Panthers hockey games in South Florida, there's probably a pretty good chance that you have seen commercials for a company called The Ticket Clinic. The Ticket Clinic is a law firm that advertises heavily during Florida Panthers TV games and promotes its success fighting traffic tickets. I had seen those commercials over and over and over again, but I never actually imagined that I would use them until now. So the following morning, Storm and I started our drive back home to the Florida Keys. I searched for the Ticket Clinic website where I found a number that I could text a picture of my traffic ticket to. So I did. And exactly 10 minutes later, I received a text message with a quote for $113.22 to fight my speeding ticket. At that price, I decided, why not? I paid the $113.22 immediately with my credit card, and I handed the whole situation over to them. And then I waited. Fast forward a little more than 2 months. On July 1st of 2026, I received a notification from the Ticket Clinic. An attorney had actually appeared in court on my behalf on June 24. And according to the notification that I received, the court withheld adjudication. There would be no points assessed and no conviction would appear on my Florida driving record. So success, right? Sort of. Because there was one more little detail. Court costs. $300. Which brings us to the moment that you've all been waiting for. Did hiring the Ticket Clinic actually save me money compared with my situation in 2023 dealing with Lucky's distracted driving ticket? Now, let's do the math. The Ticket Clinic fee, $113.22. Court costs, $300. Grand total, $413.22. Lucky's ticket plus the driving school 3 years ago cost me $360.33, which means that fighting Karma's ticket actually cost me $52.89 more than what I paid for Lucky's ticket. But there was one very important difference: no driving school. So was paying that extra $52.89 worth it? For me, yes. But of course, we still need to convert this to the official TesLUCKY unit of financial measurement, the skinny vanilla latte. Based on the current Key West price of $7.58 for a Starbucks venti skinny vanilla latte, before tip, Karma's speeding ticket cost me the equivalent of approximately 55 skinny vanilla lattes. That is a lot of coffee. So what do you think? Was spending $413.22 worth it to end up with no points, no driving school, and no conviction? Would you have hired the ticket clinic, or would you have just paid the ticket and moved on? Please let me know in the comments. I am genuinely curious to know what you would have done. And my biggest takeaway from this whole experience, yes, the easiest way to avoid a speeding ticket is obviously to drive the speed limit. But there's another lesson here too. I was in an unfamiliar situation. I disengaged full self-driving for a perfectly understandable reason. I missed my turn, I tried to fix my mistake myself, and then a series of little decisions ultimately ended with me sitting on the side of Peters Road holding a speeding ticket. Had I simply tapped that full self-driving button and let karma navigate us back to these superchargers, this entire story would have never happened. I'd be 55 skinny vanilla lattes richer, but I wouldn't have had this TesLUCKY video to share with you. And apparently, the most expensive part of full self-driving is turning it off.